At this time, I'd like to bring up Pat Moynihan's team, Julia Pyle, for the pledge and four-way test, and Neville say the prayer.
Please pray with me. Father, we thank you so much for a service club like this where we can have an impact in the world. We thank you, Father, for the servants represented in this club and for the food we've had. We pray that you bless our bodies. Also, Father, we pray for those who are victims of the shooting yesterday, that, Father, you can be with those families, and also, Father, the revolutions and the unrest all over the world, Father, that if it's possible, that you can bring peace to those places and stability. Father, we thank you again for Rotary and all that it stands for, and for us being able to serve you in this way. Through Jesus Christ we pray. Amen.
Amen. Jesus is calling.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First,
Is the truth.
Second,
Is fair to all concerned.
Third,
Will build goodwill and better friendships.
and fourth.
Will be beneficial to all concerned.
Sean, do you have any announcements?
We have Charlie Hurst back with us, and he's a respected member. Welcome, Charlie. What's your hand up? What you do?
3 months breakout, sir. 3 months, 4 months ago.
Awesome, Charlie. That's how we do it. We have Beth Peter back with us, respected member. Beth, you want to tell us quickly? I think I know by now.
I am Beth. I work with Boone County Schools. I'm a job coach for high school. And I don't know if we have anyone from Master Provisions or
Roger's here.
Freedom today. Roger. I would just like to thank both of those businesses for opening those doors to the students that I work with. It gives them just absolutely invaluable hands-on, real-world experience. So thank you, Roger, and I have Lawrence Freedom here today.
Zach. Zach.
Thank you, Beth. We have Joe Schlum with us from Heritage Bank. Joe, you want to stand up and tell us what you do?
It's Joe Schlem.
Schlem. Schlem 50.
Yeah. So anyway, it is like my first 4 hours at and I come to Heritage by way of PNC Bank, where I was for many years. So, yes.
So do you loan money, Joe?
Oh, yes.
I'm needing some lunch today.
Okay.
Welcome, Joe. Thanks. We have with us Max. He likes to go by the singular name, just like Elvis. He's going to stand up and tell you why. Welcome, Max.
Thank you, guys. I'm Max, initial name, so last name doesn't really flow too easily for everybody. I'm at Wells Fargo. I'm working with Case Lincoln and all this.
Great. Welcome.
And James has asked me to get a foursome together for the golf outing that you guys have.
There you go.
There you go.
What a great start.
Perfect.
October, the first Friday in October. Let me look at the brochure here. 5th, October 5th. If you need a brochure, let me know. Last year we had a great turnout and a great amount of money, and it's all raised for scholarships for kids that in high school in Boone County. Doing all the different programs as well. So it's always a good event. We've been doing this since our 21st year. We got out of the picture sticks. We've all you know the way out there now. So that's good.
Yes, we do.
It's actually close to where our field station is going to be talked about today. So that's a good thing. So the email was pushed out by Jacob folks. Thank you for that. So you're getting that in that way as well. And if not, I have a brochure here that'll help you get your review.
Thank you for always taking care of that. It's a big thing for our club. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's-
Thank you. Dr. Booth said we're going to have a golf outing and you're going to be in charge of it.
Hey, Jim, it's up on the website also.
So Julie just reminded us it's up on our website. So there, is that correct? Do we take credit cards? Yeah.
We're
Okay,
working on that.
So Sean still wants hard cash.
That farmer coming with his fancy machine or
He can take.
for a building, they have something they can do.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Also a reminder, we have a board meeting right after this. And I know that we have one last week for many reasons, but today we 1:10 sharp. If you reserve a room, we'll be meeting in the boardroom. Okay, just down the hall. Okay. Remember, we have a golf outing, which is very important, but not nearly as important as Sean's golf outing. And that if you go to our website or go to the newsletter that I sent out last Friday, there's a link if you want more information on it. We do have a event, and you're going to hear just as often. Our auction is just as much as you can hear about our golf outing. Our change of location on October. So I brought in a basket that I assembled. Well, to be truthful, I won it unintentionally, so someone else is going to get the benefit of it at our golf or at our auction. It is a Skechers basket. So you have many different pencils, coupon in free lessons. I'm not sure if you or some benefit from it, that's when you bid on it. And it just happens to be a month ago, whether it's a grandchild or a spouse. I think that would be something, that's just an example of something that you could bring. We talked about Sean, and then now we're on to, unless someone else has any more announcements, I know our speaker has asked for 30 minutes. We're going to get him as close to 30 as he can. But Zach has about a 2-minute presentation here that he'd like to talk about. Thank you. Make it last.
I will be introducing our speaker today, but I did have a brief announcement. It's not pleasant for me, but I need to announce it anyways. I'll be leaving the club very soon. I took an opportunity with the AAA team of the Kansas City Royals, which is my team.
Good job.
So I'm going to be leaving that very soon. Is it Omaha, Nebraska? I know nothing about Omaha, Nebraska. If you know anyone there, please hook me up with them. All right, let's talk about getting a place to live. I enjoy being here for this is goes a long way as I've moved up, and this has been my favorite club. So thank you all for accepting me, and I'll keep in touch. But I do want to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Chris Lortz with Thomas More College Biology Field Station. Dr. began teaching at college in 1994. Since then, he has taught a variety of classes, including aquatic biology and genetics, among others. In 1999 and again in 2015, he received the award for the Outstanding Full. He has teaching grants focusing on the improvement of middle school science education in the state. Besides his teaching, he serves as the director of the Center for Ohio River Research and Education at the college's biology field station. Through the center, he has been awarded several research grants in biology, conservation of aquatic species. He collaborates with US EPA, USFW, and the Newport Aquarium in the collection and care of the local freshwater specimens, and serves as curator of fishes at the fishes. Wow, I've been saying it wrong the whole year. Fishes the whole time. Cincinnati Museum of Natural History. In the community, Chris has been active with Big Brother, Big Sisters of Greater Cincinnati for over 20 years, served on the boards of the Ohio Riverway, the Ohio River Basin Research and Education, and the Ohio Lake Management Society Foundation at the Newport Aquarium. Welcoming Dr. Lortz.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate that introduction, and sir, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the field station. How many people have ever been out to our field station in Campbell County? Coming out invite you to come out when you get the opportunity. We have different open houses. If you're involved with the group that's unique, we have that as well, and we give that to non. So again, thank you for the opportunity to talk about the field. It's an exciting time for us. Here, our 50 of the biology field station. We had a whole series of events to commemorate that. Here's our field station, at least most of it. On top of the hill, this is along Route 8 in Campbell County. It's actually California, Kentucky, but if you know where Melbourne, Silver Grove are, along Route 8, just downtown, and you'll eventually come across us. And we own about 25 acres up along the hill where the houses, where our staff and interns stay. Along the river, we have a lab building where most of our programs occur. About 5 years ago, we have a conference center there that sleeps classroom, living area, kitchen facility, and so we just hosted Gateway leaders for a 2-day retreat. So again, if you're looking for meeting space and you want to get away along the river, circle us for that opportunity. So we used to be a lock and dam facility. Many of you probably know there were 51 dams along the Ohio River that were originally built to raise the river for navigation purposes. Not a lot of folks know that the river was only about 2 feet deep prior to the dams and prior to the development of the valley, and it was tough to navigate. So the Corps of Engineers way back in 1879 started putting dams along the river. Ours was number 35 of 51, and that raised the level of the river for navigation purposes. And our lab building is an old lock house. So this picture was taken in 1925, and we've converted the lock house into our lab building. Most of all of these original LMDs, locks and dams, have since been removed. There's 2 left right at the mouth near Cairo, Illinois, where the Ohio spills into the Mississippi. And they modernized the dams beginning in the 1900s. Essentially what happened to that dam on the left is that the barges outgrew the locks. And so if a towboat carrying 12 barges pulls up to the original locks, they would have to double or triple lock through. So the Army Corps of Engineers in the 50s began demolishing them, modernizing our lock and dam systems. And now we have Meldal, upstream Cincinnati, Markland, and 20 dams along the Ohio River today. But when they demolished the dam at our site, that's when the college acquired the property. The site, the lock house is in the lower right, you can wall, which is still intact. And the houses up on the hill is where the workers used to live. Facility, and these were up and down the Ohio River, and they've since been replaced. So we've converted the lock house into a state-of-the-art lab that focuses on aquatic biology and the water quality of the Ohio River. So if you want to come out for a tour, you can get a tour of our labs. We have 3 labs, an aquaculture lab, a mussel lab, and a water quality lab inside the building. A couple neat spots. If you see where the water quality lab is pointing to, that's actually the flood crest in 1937. The building was almost completely submerged in water. Hard to fathom, hard to imagine the river getting that high. But then when you see the line where it says mussel lab, that's where it got in 1997. So we take the good thing right on the river. Every winter, the water gets up and down. So the Ohio River fluctuates like a yo-yo. It's a big watershed, and we've got to contend with that. We have a pump in the river, and that allows us to bring river water straight in to do our testing and monitoring of the water. Over 5 million people get their drinking water from the Ohio River. And so we're one of the spots that protects it or monitors it for spills, for other contaminants, where the drinking water authorities, both in northern Kentucky and greater Cincinnati, would have to shut the intakes down temporarily. So we're just upstream of those, and allows us to monitor the river in time to take any corrective action. So we're building a new building, which should go online this fall. We're excited about it. In the lock house on the right is where most of our lab programs occur, and it's also where we've been juggling a lot of our K-12 programs. We host about 2,500 school children from Boone, Kent, and Campbell, and Cincinnati throughout the year, and we've kind of run out of space in the lab building as our programs grew, and we want to continue to meet the demands of the K-12 programs. So we had an old storage shed that we're tearing down, and again, in about a month or so, we'll have a new outreach center just for those schools that come out. We're excited about that. So the mission of the field station is to educate and engage folks, students and visitors of all ages about the Ohio River watershed. We like to empower students and the general community about the impact on the river ecosystem. We argue that the Ohio River is our greatest natural resource. It's where we get our drinking water. It has a big impact on routes, so it's a place to recreate. And from our perspective, it's a rich ecosystem. So plenty of things on which to focus with the Ohio River, and it's really our main focus there. So each summer, we hire a crew of undergraduates from all over the country. These are Thomas More students, but we had students from University of Washington in Seattle to New York and Florida, and about 40 states over the years have participated in our undergraduate research. But if you have children, nieces, nephews, friends, neighbors, who are college looking for hands-on research experience, certainly look us up. These are paid internships. The students stay on site and they do a lot of research while they're there. Our signature has been the bioassessment of the Ohio River, and we do this around Duke Energy's power plants. They used to own Beck Jord, well, they still own Beck Jord, although it's now retired. And they used to own Zimmer Power Plant on the right. And we've been monitoring the river for fish populations in 71. The Ohio River's had a rich input track in 50-year studies to track those changes. We also work with SD1 and the Boone County Conservation District. We partner with them to establish what's called the Environmental Academy. So Boone County Conservation District biologists, SD1 biologists, they assess the streams throughout northern Kentucky, many of which are right here in your backyard. Well, our students work alongside them as field techs, as field assistants. So throughout the summer, we're in Boone County, Canton County, King County. We switch different Watersheds. Gunpowder Creek, Wilbur, Middle Creek are some of the ones we've studied recently. And it allows us to assess the water quality of these streams, but also assess the impacts of the stormwater pipes and the sewer pipes that we're doing on those. How are those impacting our environment? And so what we do is in those stream assessments, we go out with a team and we collect lots of biological data, lots of chemical data, lots of physical data about our streams. And report a lot of our streams are some of the best in the state. And so we have valuable aquatic resources to protect, both from an ecological perspective, but also from a human health perspective as well. We started our lab programs after 9/11, coincidentally enough. So after 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security was worried about the contamination of our open water sources for drinking water, and the Ohio River is just that. And so we were concerned about contamination, intentionally or otherwise, of drinking water in the country. And so we partnered with the US EPA, and we developed what's called an early warning detection system. And so if you recall, we have a pump in the river, we bring river water into the building, and inside that tank, we have clams, and clams filter the water. So the river water is flowing through that tank, and these clams are filtering it. Each one of those clams are hooked up to an electrode. If the water quality drops, there's a particular issue, it's literally clamp up. They shut down the alarm. So it allows us to monitor the river 24/7 by the use of these clams, and if we detect a contaminant, we can alert the drinking water authorities to shut that pass, let us investigate. It's a really ingenious way to use the natural biology of these organisms to be an early wake-up call, kind of like a canary in a coal mine. It gives us an idea by their biology. And then we started aquariums for us. In fact, grown where we developed them more of all places. Aquarium has opened up the aquarium for us. We teach a class there. It's the only aquarium in the country where a class is exclusively taught on site. And so now we're drawing students from all over the Midwest. We're the only marine biology program in Kentucky and one of 3 in the entire Midwest. And so we're getting students to come in that want to work at the oceans eventually, but they get their training right here in the backyard. So they build a big quarantine tank, and this allows us to house some big river fish that get 4, 5, 6 feet long and keep them under managed care inside the lab to do experiments. And one of the experiments we do is a little more basic biology, not quite a connection to humans, but it's something of interest to us, and that is freshwater mussels. We have more freshwater mussels in this part of the country than anywhere else in the world. Lots of freshwater mussel species in the Ohio River, and Gunpowder Creek, and the Licking River. They have a really interesting life cycle where the larvae of mussels are released by the female, and they jump onto the gills of the fish. So it's a mussel on the left, and the larvae are up on the upper left. They jump onto the gills of the fish for about a month. Doesn't harm the fish. In fact, we don't think they're. And after about a month, they fall off those little juveniles. We don't know which fish the mussels use, and that's important for the conservation of these mussels to be able to have the fish host available. So what we do is we get the mussels, and the endangered mussel we're working with, and the larvae on the left, and then we infect that gill of the fish with those larvae, and then after a month, we're looking for the guys on the right, little juveniles. And so the fish hosts are able to be identified in that location of these mussels, which in turn helps us. The more mussels, more water. So it's another one of our programs. And then in the mussel pump to run the water through, and we're samples that are in peril. So like all of these mussels came from back in 2014 as a sample where they bring them in captivity condition. There's a mussel tank cooler to get that. Our geography for the entire Cincinnati and the greater Cincinnati region is world renowned for its water quality research and technology. We're a technology cluster in the country. So we have a long history of having some of the best drinking water in the world. And that has to do with the development and implemented, and much of it at the EPA's R&D facility downtown. So they were renovating their lab, and they asked us to build a satellite lab for them. So in our lab building, we have our own aquaculture lab, and it raises fish called fathead minnows. That's the fathead minnow on the left you haven't heard of probably, but they're a standard toxicity organism. If you want to test the safety of drinking water, wastewater, or any other water sample you're interested in, you expose it to these guys, and based upon their growth survival, we can determine the toxicity. So we grow the fish on site, and there's a male guarding eggs. You can see the eggs underneath the tile. And the protocol calls for a one-day-old fish. So we have to hatch the fish year-round. So we have one-day-old fish that are really naive, haven't been exposed to a single other contaminant in their life, and then we can look and study a water sample for interest. And so what we do is we put those little fry, one-day-old fish that hardly can see them into different samples. We want to measure the water quality of Licking River, or the runoff from the airport in Gunpowder Creek stream. We expose them to those fish, and based upon how they survive, grow, and other measures the safety of that water. Our latest project was sort of out of the blue, unexpected, and that was this. Does anybody know what this is? And I'm talking about the green color on the right. We experienced this in 2015. It's what the Florida and Gulf of Mexico is experiencing all year long, and that's a harmful algal bloom. They call them red tides in Florida, if you're familiar with that. And this is a green tide. This is a harmful algal bloom that we had in the Ohio River in 2015. Lake Erie experiences them every summer. The Ohio River never experiences them. Usually with the flowing water, it prevents blooms like this from happening. I think the Gulf of Mexico's bloom is in its 7th month, costing multi-million dollars to the tourism industry, among other damages. We had a bloom in 15. And it was surprising because we never had one since the early 70s. And the entire river, at least much of it, looked like this, looked like green paint spilled on it. It occurred in the fall of 2015, and it was a wake-up call for us. The bloom is caused by bacterial species that look and act like algae. So algae are a normal part of the river, so are these blue-green algae, the bacteria, but they normally don't get that abundant. And that's them floating on top of the pile. So they were thick as thieves, coating the entire stretch of the river. such that each state along the river issued advisories that fall. Don't fish, boat, or swim in the river, it's not safe. Keep your pets out of the river, it's not safe. And this was unusual for us. And so out of that bloom in 2015, we developed what's called a HAB, Harmful Algal Bloom Detection Network, which allows us to monitor the bacteria levels throughout the year. And the way we do that is we have a camera next to the river. It's a pretty simple but effective way to monitor algae. That camera takes a picture every hour of the river. 24/7, 365, we're taking a picture. Based upon the photo, we can determine to blue-green algae. Blue-green algae, that's the harmful algae, go up. We can take action, try to figure out what's causing that, and hopefully prevent another bloom in the future. So that's a little bit about our research. Mostly focuses on two things: water quality of the river for a human health perspective, and also the ecology of the river from a biological perspective. The other thing we do that might be of interest is we host grade schools, K through 12. This is 72 kids from an elementary school here in Boone County that came out. Days like this, we want to just keep them safe, and it's like a giant recess all day to have them running around. But we also have high schoolers. So Carrie's daughter was one of our campers a few years ago. So if you have any students interested in STEM disciplines, we have a week-long camp where they stay on site, get out on the water, and do a lot of hands-on activities with our college students. So a lot of K-12 outreach, and that was the impetus for building that new building to house some of those programs. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the field station, and I certainly welcome you to come out and visit if it's something of interest to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have there been any of the invasive carp species made up this far?
Yeah, so he's talking about the invasive carp, silver and bighead carp, Mississippi river watershed farms in the late 90s through floods. So they first got into the Mississippi River, began moving upstream the Mississippi. They came into the Ohio River in the early 2000s. At our field station, we were the first one to document one above Cincinnati in 2007. So they're all the way up to Pittsburgh now. So here we are in 2018. Took them about 20 years to make it up the Mississippi, up the Ohio, and a lot of the other tributaries. In some places like Lake Barkley and Kentucky Lake and land between the lakes, it is completely infested with Asian carp. Illinois River is epicenter for Asian carp. We're fortunate in the Ohio River, the dams actually limit the reproduction. And so they're here, they're just not as abundant as they are in other places. The biggest concern right now is they're knocking on the door of the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, Lake Erie. And so we spend about $76 million a year simply to keep them out of the Great Lakes because we're worried about the fisheries collapse and other impacts. So invasive species like the Asian carp are just a concern to biologists, ecologists, huge impact. And so to the answer again, we have them, whereas elsewhere we think the dynamics of the dam, but they're really thick and really problematic.
Chris, can you explain some of the behavior that I might know?
Yeah, so.
You prevent it, I mean, what you do to actually keep them.
Yeah. So the Asian carp are part of 5 invasive species from Asia. So common carp have been here for ornamental ponds. We see those swimming around. That's an Asian carp, grass carp. The 2 silver, they get pretty big. And the silver, I think what Sean's talking about is they jump out of the water when they hear the boat motors. We're not entirely sure why they jump out of the water when they hear a boat motor. But if you've ever seen a video of them, it's comical at first, but it's also sad when you see how thick they are and driven out everything else. But these silver carp come out of the water like popcorn, popping out, and they've caused injuries to people, boaters and fishers and things like that. Large planktivores. So we brought them over intentionally to help keep algae down in our fish farms along the Mississippi River. So we brought them over, they ate the algae, and that helps curb the pond growth of algae. But in the floods, they escaped and then they just spread like wildfire. How are we keeping them from the Great Lakes? There are 2, maybe 3 connections between the Ohio River watershed and the Great Lakes watershed. One is in Chicago. the Chicago sanitary ship. One connection allows the ship to go from the Great Lakes to the Ohio River in New Orleans. And that sanitary fence is going across every day to keep up and then turning around, coming up, so it acts as a deterrent. The other way is to be diligent on allowing people to report where they find them, and then fishing rodeos. Like I said, laying between the lake, Kentucky Lake, they pull out 120,000 pounds of Asian carp in a weekend rodeo. And those are harvested, those are sacrificed, and they're also being marketed as Kentucky Gold as a seafood item. A lot of people like to eat them, they're white, flaky fillet. And so that's one way, really any and all ways are being considered. U.S. Fish and Wildlife captures them and calls them, just harvests them out. So not easy, and most of us think it's a matter of time, not if, but when they get into the Great Lakes. Okay?
It may, Steve really appreciate his time. Resource, he said. Are you doing anything more of this? Because they got a lot out of it.
Yeah, we have a pretty extensive study abroad program. I took students for 4 days and elsewhere at Galapagos Islands, Costa Rica. Personally, I'm investigating abroad program. One of my colleagues is going to New Zealand. Is going study abroad programs at Thomas More and KU and elsewhere are really focusing on that. Zebra moths, Great Lakes, and look at this is zebra studying with the great received the 1980 they just grew like gangbusters. They were everywhere in the late 90s, early 2000s, major concerns. All of the intakes had to scrape them out, send divers down, use different chemicals, and they were everywhere and anywhere, big alarm. In 2001, they crashed. 2002, you couldn't find them, they were just gone. Now they came back up and they're at modest levels. We think they have a classic outstripping of their resources. So as they ramped up in the late 90s, there were so many around that there just wasn't enough food, nobody got enough, and they all crashed. And then they rebounded, but we have a different hydrological regime in the river. We're wetlands now, and that impacts their spawning, and also fish have been accustomed to it. There's a lot of fish preying upon them. So between changes in our water flow in the springs and fish predators, we keep their levels at modest levels.
Jim, you have a question?
Yes, is the algae or whatever it is in the sea covering ponds and here, is that the same thing?
So it could be. Green algae can do the same thing, pond scum. Blue-green algae is a bacterial species that looks and acts like it, so it could be. And oftentimes small ponds do get harmful algal blooms. If you see a fish kill, even birds can get killed, then it's probably a harmful algal bloom. So you can have blooms, but it could be green algae and it's not harmful other than sort of the aesthetic value gets dropped.
Those algae blooms in the river, are they kind of associated with the flow?
Yeah, so low flow, warm temperatures, low oxygen, that's the conditions conducive for a bloom. And normally the river's flowing enough where the oxygen occurs. So low flow, warm temperatures, low oxygen, perfect recipe for a bloom.
What's the oxygen level, say, from the bottom?
Yeah, so surprisingly, the top and the bottom uniformly mixed. That flow of the river is turbulent, so there's not a layer effect that you get in lakes. It's pretty uniform.
Other questions?
All right, thanks again. We appreciate it.